Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here. We're excited to chat with you. So we're going to talk about building a culture of inclusion. And this is my lovely Slido champion from T-Mobile, Arlen Love. He's been a pioneer for Slido and T-Mobile, and we've connected really nicely. And thank you for being here.
Happy to be here. Good to see everybody.
So let's just kick off.
Yeah.
So as a senior customer experience manager at T-Mobile, can you tell me a little bit more about what that actually means, what you do?
Yeah, for sure. So I look for a lot of different efficiencies in people's processes or workflows, and it sounds like that article almost, like efficiencies and not empathy. But I think it's important to be able to use that to do what I really love, which is help people work better together. And often that includes incorporating digital tools. Allowing people to have more of their voice heard, including more people into the conversation itself. And I love the fact that my company also lets me do some creative stuff like instructional design. I get to flex some social media stuff for our socials. It's fun.
Beautiful. And you told me, just for like some tangible example, you told me about a project that you ran when you first started the role. Do you want to?
Yeah, exactly. So when I first joined this team, we were kind of just forming for the first time, and I went into a role as well. And one of the big pieces was we have 3 HQs at T-Mobile, and then we have some remote people too. So think about it as 4 HQs, 3 physical, and then our digital HQ as well. How do we, and this is the assignment, right? How do we make sure that we make a place where people can connect, we feel like we're in the same building, and when we meet for the first time, as we did in person for the first time yesterday, we have to stop and think and go, have we met before? Even if we weren't in the same building.
Yeah, and I felt that way with you. Yeah. Beautiful. So, in prepping for this event, of course, and talking to you a few times, I know that you're really passionate about the topic of digital tools, let's say. So can you tell us a little more about why you're passionate in this area?
Yeah, I mean, work is such a big part of our lives, and for so long it was like work and then home, right? But if we are able to make people's lives better at work, it makes their lives better in general. And I think the use of digital tools in a creative way can really help foster more voices. Some voices that are already here that can feel more comfortable, easier to speak up, and some that now can join if we kind of help do things differently. The second thing, though, is timing. So over the last few years, with all the changes, the schmendemic, I feel like no one wants to hear it right now, right? But one of the things that came out of that is the overall baseline knowledge of digital tools and acumen rose. And so we're on like almost a more equal digital playing field than we were before. And that's an opportunity, I feel like, to use those tools to transform or at least reevaluate how we're doing different aspects of our business and how we can, change going forward.
Yeah, I love it. So can you kind of tell us how we could imagine life at T-Mobile? What's the current setup look like? Paint the picture for us.
Yeah, so I mentioned there's 3 HQs. I'm at the Bellevue one, and it's great to have people come into the office and see them. It's great to be able to connect with people that aren't. We do 3 days a week. So it's optional on like what days, but most people do Tuesdays through Thursdays at the office where we can be in person. Thursdays is probably the most popular day. Coincidentally and completely unrelated, we have a happy hour after work on Thursdays where we can be social, we can have conversations in a less formal setting, and I'm sure it has nothing to do with it, but that's the most popular day to be there. Definitely
a coincidence, yeah. Cool. So lastly, kind of setting the scene here, can you tell us about the culture a little bit?
Yeah. Well, there's a reason why I've been there for almost a decade. There's a huge BU culture at T-Mobile where you can bring your authentic self, and it's not just something we say or only encourage. I see that the people who are successful at T-Mobile, they have an authentic self that they bring to it. And what that naturally does is your leadership within the culture of your company, there's a human element to it. You have more of a connection to that piece of the company, and you feel more at home there because of it. And I think the roles too, and I don't know if this is something we say or it's just my experience, but my experience has been that there's a portion of every role that is left ambiguous to be filled by the person who's filling the role, and their passions, their interests, and their skill sets. So I feel more connected to my roles when I'm at work, and it's more of an extension of myself than just this is the job I'm doing now.
Yeah, definitely. Cool. So hopefully you guys have an idea of a day in the life of Arlen Love. So we're going to dig a little bit into kind of the challenges and solutions that you're trying to overcome here. So as kind of a thought leader in the digital tools space, what are the challenges that you're trying to solve? What are you trying to improve?
One, use your digital tools creatively. I try to encourage that with everybody I speak with. There's often, like, if you imagine the digital tool comes in a box, like Slido, and it has a label of what you're supposed to use it for. Oftentimes, if you just look at that label, it keeps you from using it in the most creative ways possible. Redefining meetings is a really big passion of mine, too. I think that I loved a lot of what Craig said. I love that piece when we're getting together. I love those badges things. It's really cool. But I think that we can reinvent how we do meetings to get further diversified viewpoints, make people more connected to our companies as well, and just overall hear more voices. And I think it's really important. And that article, the first time I saw that cover, and I want to go look at it because I think it's important while we're introducing these digital tools to make sure that it's not creating efficiency in order to pile on more work, but it's creating efficiencies to make our lives better, our employees' lives better, and the output of those employees, the work that we do, have even higher quality. Yeah, and I think overall we have the quality of meetings. I think people in general feel a little mixed, but mostly kind of in the middle of like,
There's still room for improvement to redefine and rework and keep working on it. Yeah, definitely. So you mentioned, using digital tools more creatively outside the box, right?
Sure.
So can you tell us a little bit more about how you're breaking down those little boundaries?
Yeah, definitely. Later on, you'll be hearing from Anna. She's the head of people for Asana. And Asana is a really good example of that because if you look at Asana on the label on the box, it's project management. And then a lot of people that I've worked with, they say, well, I don't have traditional projects. The first step to that is, well, it can be a work management software that helps you just work and organize and do your job better. But one of the favorite things from people I work with is I took Asana and I realized that at large companies, small companies, I'm sure you can relate, there are often really important pieces of those roles that contribute to the company that only a few people know or one person knows. And I think that's doing a disservice to that person, the company, and their peers. So we all know process docs probably, right? And we're able to move it into Asana for a lot of these roles and a lot of portions of people's roles to make them digital. For example, if you were going on a well-earned PTO next week, you'd be able to say to me, Arlen, I'm stepping away. Can you handle this part of my job? And just kind of reassign it. And it doesn't need as big of a lead up, or it's not as big of a deal to bring that to someone new. And it makes our people more cross-trained and diverse.
Yeah, I love that example. Going back to the second part of the previous question, which is about redefining meetings. Mm-hmm. So let's hear a little bit about kind of how you're looking at that, and maybe an example of how you've started to work towards that.
Yeah, I'll use my first example because this is kind of what kicked off my thinking and why I like Slido. It was that I discovered that kind of got me down this rabbit hole of thoughts. But we had a large organization that was set up to tackle one specific piece of our business. And large within T-Mobile is 1,000 people or so that we were getting together often. Our directors and VPs would be leading these meetings. And it was information heavy both ways. We want your feedback, we want your questions, we want to clarify. And we were using WebEx in the chat. And we needed a lot of subject matter experts to make sure that the correct information was going out right away. And I think you can probably relate when you need a lot of people's input, very specific knowledge. It's sometimes hard to orchestrate all that, make sure that everybody is represented on that call. So I was poking around, I found Slido, and it really unlocked the possibilities of one, I can kick out one side of that meeting, right? So if somebody was listening to a recording of it, they can still contribute. Or if there's a different thought that like my brain works differently. Sometimes my best ideas or questions come after the meeting because I've noodled on it for a minute. That gives those people a voice as well. We had some questions come in that were with people's names on it. Some were anonymous. And we found that a lot of those anonymous choices, they wouldn't have said anything. In your last Slido Elevate session, it was said, and it stuck with me, sometimes the best ideas come from the quietest people in the room. And it's about meeting them where they're at and giving them an easy outlet to be able to share their thoughts.
Yeah. And you also had shared in this specific scenario that, it kind of also played into opening the life cycle of the event a little bit, right? So now instead of just doing everything live, you're able to open it ahead of time for, let's say, somebody who couldn't join live, but they still had a question that they needed addressed, right? Or people like you who need to noodle on it for a little bit and then can address,
And we saw that today, right? We were looking at some questions that came in yesterday for this event because the meeting, the box of that meeting, start and end, they were kicked out, and we can help prepare more, give it closer to what you're looking for, and also if you're not able to attend live, your questions still can get answered.
Yeah, and so that asynchronous piece, the hybrid piece, right? It's becoming more inclusive in that way as well, because if somebody is across the pond, time zones don't line up. If someone has to go pick up their kids or go do whatever they need to do during that specific window, they're still included in the conversation.
Absolutely.
Yeah, beauteous. And yeah, just looking at our poll, we can see that there are, it's really across the board here, but there's some room for improvement, but some people are figuring it out as well.
Yeah.
So I love to see it. So you're not the only one redefining meetings here, which I'm happy about.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, love it. So, oops. I'm going to go ahead and move us forward here. And let me keep going. We heard a lot from Craig and about the importance of culture and inclusion and, kind of thinking about, inclusion being an important driver of employee satisfaction. What does inclusion look like to you? And how are you trying to, make a more inclusive environment with these digital tools?
Yeah, Craig was speaking to his company, supporting getting that voice heard from the customer or their customer, from the employees within the company, and making sure that you can hear what your people want. And that's what it's about. It's about meeting people where they're at, both that where they are comfortable and getting their voice heard, but also how they want to work. And if we can introduce a little bit more flexibility in the structure of our work days, how we do things, it allows for more voices to enter the workforce, more voices to be heard, and it creates an environment where everybody can thrive. You can have some amazing employees that are limited by them trying to fit in a box that they don't want to play in.
Yeah, definitely.
Sorry.
Yeah.
The box. I think that there's portions of our role that we can fit and we can play within the box, and then there's some like either the meeting or the structure or asynchronous work where we can just we have to be open to, and leadership has to be open to, kind of like breaking down the walls of the box itself.
Yeah, absolutely. And thinking about the dynamic workspace constantly changing over the last couple of years, right? We don't need to go into that. We all experienced it. But how can these tools really enable this changing environment?
Yeah. So some of the things I mentioned before of this short term is we can get more people's voices who are already here heard. We can answer their questions. We can get their ideas. But long term, I think that that's where the restructuring and rethinking, reevaluating how we do business today and how the work structure looks like. Because you mentioned as an example of people submitting early, maybe you have to pick up your kids, maybe you just want to, you work better at certain times, you need a break between. A lot of times with neurodivergence, you want to be able to hyper-focus and then take a break. And the more flexible we can be with the structure of our work, the more voices can enter the workforce. And I think that's that long term. As we evolve, we can have more of those voices heard and get them here. and this just a side note. So I have a 7-year-old and a 1.5 years. And if anybody has kids who are older, this might blow your mind. But between those times, they added zippers to the bottom of onesies, not just the top. Sounds like a small thing, but complete. And we had babies for like ever, right? But that tells me that somebody's voice is heard. Somebody entered the workforce and said, why aren't we doing it that way? And those ideas, and there's even better examples out there that just we don't know about yet, because those people with those ideas, they're not here yet. And I want to hear them.
Yeah, absolutely. We talked a little bit about those walls, those boxes, right? So kind of making those a little bit more tangible. We know that people work differently, consume differently, learn differently, right? Like we all, I'm sure some of us are visual, some of us, prefer to read in silence, et cetera. And in prepping for everything, we talked a lot about neurodiversity in the workplace and like people who don't necessarily fit that box, right? Or the traditional box, let's say. And we talked about the importance of fostering an environment that supports people who maybe work a little bit differently in our current workplace, right? So, how do you think organizations can help support that?
Yeah, I think some of the things we've mentioned, like the more asynchronous work, and depending on your business, it might make sense or not to have that flexibility in the workplace and how you work and when you work. But people think that they might be more productive pretty overwhelmingly. I think Future Forum did a survey that was very similar to the same results, whereas I believe 94% of people feel like they would thrive in that and they want more flexibility in when they work. So right now is April, which is Autism Acceptance Month. And it used to be called Autism Awareness Month. And the reason why that change was made is because we don't need you to be aware of us. We need you to accept that we work differently in order for us to thrive. We need you to embrace that if we make some changes to accommodate more people, those people are going to contribute hugely and thrive in that role. I believe that there's a lot of people throughout history. I mean, for example, like Einstein even was neurodivergent. A lot of people who really changed the world were. And I think that it's a disservice if we don't include that voice and really make sure that we have them in the workplace.
Yeah, absolutely. And we can see from the poll that people agree that flexibility can lead to higher productivity because they're given the best way that they can bring themselves, right? So yeah, I think that I feel
like the not sure is like, what is that even? I can't even fathom, right? And then like the pretty telling part is 0% no. We will do better work the more flexible we can be.
Yeah, I agree. So, I know you're very active on LinkedIn, and you've put out a lot of posts about this topic and some of the other things we've talked about today. So I just want to give you a little plug. If anybody wants to kind of learn more from what Arlen has shared, it's pretty intriguing, and you can take a look and connect.
I went into some more details on our article recently to help support this, just so there's some more examples and such. But also, I'd love to hear if there's anything that touched you or if there's any questions you have. I'm there.
Love it. So in the meantime, I think we can take a couple questions here. So let's take a look at what we have. I'm going to go ahead and just surprise you with something here.
Nice.
I'm going to start with this one. So what creative ways have Slido polls been used or shown to showcase engagement? So I think, you shared a couple examples with me about the scenario that you explained a few minutes ago. So maybe you can give some examples on that.
Yeah, so one of the pieces we did to get everybody into Slido, we did an icebreaker. And a lot of these things that we were talking about, culture, icebreaker, all these things, they feel fluffy sometimes. And the amount they contribute to the culture and the workplace and enjoyment of it is huge. But one of the pieces that we did was we did a icebreaker in the beginning of those meetings, and that really got people into the tool so that they were more open to ask the questions when they had them or give the feedback or participate in the polls. So it was more informal icebreaker than that. And then we usually use a different tool for feedback at the end of the session so we can improve for you next time. But you're already in Slido, so we did the feedback and the poll in the same app now, so they don't have to open something else. They're already there.
Mm-hmm. What's an example of an icebreaker you love?
You know what?
Your go-to.
Yeah, sure. Favorite superpower would be one of mine. If you were to have any superpower, what would it be? And I was speaking last night to some people about how my wife thinks I'm a hoarder. She's wrong. But maybe though, because when I was a kid, I wanted to have my superpower would be that I can pull out anything out of my pocket that someone needs, and like it's just there. You need something, I got it. So maybe that is true, and that's probably why I like EDC, everyday carry. I'm like, I've got a collapsible lint roller for you.
Well, also you're a dad, so that's like at least 50% of your job, right? Yeah. Is to have what's needed in your pocket. I love it. Cool. So there's a fun one here that is a slightly different idea, and that's, this person is saying from their experience, you're not always able to cater to everyone's needs, right? Mm-hmm. And so how do you set the right expectation for everyone so that people don't feel ignored, but, got to take it one step at a time, right? So
Yeah, I think the key piece is set that expectation, right? Like I said before, not every aspect can be catered to each individual, but I think the biggest point here is it doesn't have to be catered to the individual. If we are adding more flexibility to how people work, and redefining meetings is a big piece because that allows for different changes in the workplace. The person is defining it themselves. And that's the point. As flexible as we can be in the structure of our work and how people work, it allows people to do it in the ways that work best for them. So we're not catering it to anybody. We're letting people cater it to themselves, I think, is the goal.
Yeah. And I think it's also a constant learning experience, right? Mm-hmm. So you give people a tool, you see how they use it, and then where are the gaps? Okay, mm-hmm. Now maybe we need something else in return or, also, and then kind of keep going from there and see where the gaps are and continue to fill those.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Cool.
Well, we crushed it right on time.
Nailed it.
So thank you guys so much for hanging out with us. And hopefully you had some beautiful takeaways from Arlen. And I'll give it over to you, Nadia.
Thanks, y'all.